The room was silent except for the faint hum of the holographic projector. Jacob Carter stood at the center of the chamber, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. Before him floated a massive translucent image of the Galactic Council's assembly hall, a grand circular room filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. Each delegate sat in their designated pod, glowing softly in hues of blue, green, and violet. The air felt heavy with judgment. Jacob swallowed hard. He had spent years preparing for moments like this, but nothing could have readied him for the weight of representing all of humanity. On one side of the room, Emily Dawson watched nervously on a live feed from Earth. Her face was pale, her fingers gripping the edges of her desk as if to steady herself. She had built the quantum technology that now threatened to bring ruin upon her planet, and though she hadn't intended harm, the consequences loomed larger than anyone could have imagined. The head of the council, an imposing figure known as Counselor Valen, spoke first. His voice resonated through the chamber, deep and cold. Earth has violated galactic law by experimenting with unstable quantum fields, he declared, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. Your actions have disrupted the fabric of space-time, endangering not only your own world, but countless others across the galaxy. Jacob took a step forward, his throat dry. Counselor Valen, we understand the concerns raised here today, he began, his tone measured but firm. However, humanity acted out of necessity. Our planet faces resource shortages, environmental collapse, and overpopulation. We sought solutions, not to endanger others, but to ensure our survival. Valen's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened further. Survival does not justify recklessness, he replied. You were warned repeatedly about the dangers of such experiments. Yet you proceeded without regard for the safety of other civilizations. Emily flinched at those words. She remembered the warnings well. They had come in the form of cryptic messages from alien probes, intercepted by Earth's astronomers. At the time, they seemed vague, almost dismissible. But now, staring at the devastation unfolding before her, the fractured star systems, the displaced populations, she realized how wrong she had been. Jacob continued, his voice gaining strength. We acknowledge our mistakes, Counselor, and we are willing to cooperate fully to rectify the damage caused. But sanctions will only punish billions of innocent people who had no part in these decisions. Isolation will cripple us, leaving us unable to contribute meaningfully to the galactic community. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some delegates nodded thoughtfully. Others exchanged skeptical glances. One particularly hostile representative, Ambassador Trelke of the Siren Empire, leaned forward aggressively. His elongated skull gleamed under the chamber lights as he sneered. Your kind has always been reckless, Jacob Carter. Perhaps isolation is exactly what you deserve. Jacob clenched his jaw, but kept his composure. Ambassador Trelke, isolation won't solve anything. It will only breed resentment and fear. If you truly wish to prevent future incidents, then work with us. Help us learn, grow, and become better stewards of the galaxy. For a moment, there was silence. Then Valen rose from his seat, his towering frame casting a shadow over the entire chamber. Enough, he said sharply. The Council has reached its decision. Effective immediately, Earth will be placed under strict sanctions. All hyperspace lanes connecting your planet to the rest of the galaxy will be closed. Trade privileges are revoked. You will remain isolated until further notice. Jacob's heart sank. He opened his mouth to protest, but Valen raised a hand, silencing him. This session is adjourned. Back on Earth, Emily buried her face in her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the reality set in. Humanity had crossed a line, and now they would pay the price. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. President Laura Bennett sat at the head of a long, polished table in the United Nations Security Council chamber. The room buzzed with tension as leaders from around the world leaned forward, their faces etched with worry. A large screen on the wall displayed the live feed of Earth's solar system, now surrounded by a glowing red boundary that marked the Council's blockade. It was a grim reminder of humanity's new reality. "We're trapped," muttered General Ryan Mitchell, his voice low but sharp. He stood near the window, arms crossed tightly over his chest. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "They've cut us off completely. No trade, no travel, no communication beyond basic channels. If we don't act now, we'll be sitting ducks." Laura raised a hand to quiet him. She turned her attention back to the group. "Let's stay focused. We need solutions, not panic. What are our options?" Across the table, Ambassador Sofia Alvarez shook her head. "Compliance might be our only choice," she said softly. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her tone carried the weight of diplomacy. "The Council has made its decision. Fighting them would mean going up against species far more advanced than us. We can't win that fight." Ryan slammed his fist onto the table, making everyone jump. "And what happens after we comply? Do you think they'll just forgive us and let us back into the galactic community? They'll keep us isolated forever, Sophia. We'll become slaves to their rules, dependent on their mercy." Sophia glared at him. "At least we'll survive. War means extinction." The argument escalated quickly, voices rising as delegates took sides. Some agreed with Sophia, believing submission was the safest path. Others sided with Ryan, convinced that resistance was the only way to preserve Earth's independence. In the chaos, Emily Dawson sat quietly in the corner, her laptop open in front of her. She hadn't been invited to speak. She wasn't a politician or a soldier, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing guilt in her stomach. This mess started with her technology, and she felt responsible for finding a way out. Laura finally raised both hands, demanding silence. When the room settled, she spoke firmly. "Enough. Arguing won't solve anything. Let's consider the facts. Compliance may buy us time, but it leaves us vulnerable. Resistance is risky, but it keeps control in our hands. I want input from everyone here before we decide." Jacob Carter entered the room just then, his face pale and drawn. He had returned from Proxima Centauri Prime hours earlier, and the journey had done nothing to ease his stress. He nodded briefly at Laura before taking a seat. "The Council isn't bluffing," he said, his voice heavy. "They see us as reckless and dangerous. If we push back, they'll respond with force, and they have the power to destroy us." Ryan leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Then let them try. We've got one advantage they don't expect: sheer determination. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before: nuclear war, pandemics, climate disasters, and we've always found a way to survive. This is no different." Laura studied him carefully. "You're proposing war, General. Are you sure we're ready for that?" "We don't have a choice," Ryan replied. "If we roll over now, we lose everything: our freedom, our dignity, even our future. But if we fight, we might just earn their respect. Maybe even find allies among other species who hate the Council's tyranny." Emily's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She wanted to speak up, to explain how her quantum tech could still be useful, but fear held her back. Instead, she listened as the debate raged on, each side presenting arguments that seemed equally impossible. By the end of the meeting, Laura announced her decision. "We'll prepare for both scenarios," she said. "Diplomatic efforts will continue, but we'll also bolster our defenses. General Mitchell, you'll oversee the military strategy. Jacob, I need you to reach out to any neutral alien factions who might sympathize with us." As the leaders filed out of the room, Emily lingered behind, staring at her computer screen. Lines of code blinked back at her, fragments of the very technology that had sparked this crisis. For the first time, she wondered if her work could become something more: a weapon, perhaps, or a tool to tip the scales in humanity's favor. The thought terrified her, but deep down, she knew they needed every advantage they could get. General Ryan Mitchell stood on the stage, his tall frame illuminated by bright spotlights. Behind him, a massive screen displayed images of Earth's solar system surrounded by the Council's blockade, a stark reminder of humanity's dire situation. Thousands of people had gathered in the square outside the United Nations headquarters, their faces painted with fear and anger. Millions more watched from home, glued to their screens as Ryan delivered his speech. "People of Earth," he began, his voice deep and commanding, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Today, we face one of the greatest challenges in our history. The Galactic Council has turned its back on us, isolating us and leaving us to fend for ourselves. But let me make one thing clear. We will not bow to their demands. We will not surrender our freedom." The crowd erupted into cheers, fists raised high. Among them was Sarah Thompson, a young engineer who had been working tirelessly on Earth's defense systems. She clutched her tablet tightly, feeling a mix of pride and unease. Ryan's words stirred something inside her, but she couldn't shake the reality of what lay ahead. Humanity wasn't ready for war, not against species with technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. Ryan continued, his tone unwavering. "They see us as weak, reckless, and unimportant. But they are wrong. Humanity has always risen to meet its challenges. From the first steps on the moon to the discovery of quantum energy, we have proven time and again that we are capable of greatness. Now, it is time to prove it once more." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "We will prepare. Every ship, every weapon, every resource will be dedicated to defending our planet. We will fight for our survival, for our future, and for the generations to come. This is not just a battle for Earth. It is a battle for our place among the stars." The crowd roared again, their fear momentarily replaced by determination. Sarah felt a surge of emotion as she watched people around her chant Ryan's name. For the first time since the crisis began, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity could pull this off. Back at the military command center, Michael Brooks sat in a simulator cockpit, sweat dripping down his forehead. He gripped the controls tightly as holographic enemy ships swarmed around him. The training exercises were brutal, designed to push pilots to their limits. Most of the recruits had never seen real combat before, and the pressure was overwhelming. "You're too slow, Brooks," shouted an instructor over the comms. "If you can't keep up, you'll get yourself killed out there." Michael gritted his teeth, focusing harder. He knew the stakes. If Earth went to war, pilots like him would be the first line of defense. Failure wasn't an option. As the simulation ended, he climbed out of the cockpit, his legs trembling from exhaustion. Other recruits milled about, some laughing nervously, others staring blankly at the floor. They all shared the same thought. This wasn't a game. Lives depended on their readiness. Meanwhile, Emily Dawson sat alone in her lab, staring at the glowing equations on her monitor. Her mind raced with possibilities. The quantum technology she had developed was powerful, but dangerous. Could it be adapted into a weapon? She hesitated, knowing the risks involved. Turning science into warfare went against everything she believed in. Yet, as she thought about the Council's blockade and the suffering it caused, she realized she might not have a choice. That evening, Sarah found herself at a recruitment drive in downtown New York. Volunteers lined up by the hundreds, eager to join the fight. Some were young, barely out of school, while others were older, veterans of Earth's past conflicts. She watched as a teenager signed up, his hands trembling as he held the pen. It broke her heart, but she also felt a strange sense of admiration. These people weren't soldiers. They were ordinary men and women stepping up when their world needed them most. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Sarah looked toward the stars. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: humanity had chosen to fight. And for better or worse, there was no turning back. The hum of machinery filled the air as engineers and technicians worked around the clock in Earth's largest shipyard. Massive vessels, once used for exploration and trade, were being retrofitted into warships. Sparks flew as welding torches cut through metal, and the smell of burning alloy lingered everywhere. Sarah Thompson moved through the chaos, her tablet in hand, checking progress on the upgrades. She had been assigned to oversee the installation of new plasma cannons, weapons reverse-engineered from alien tech recovered during past encounters. Keep the alignment tight. She called out to a group of workers assembling a turret. If it's off by even a millimeter, the recoil will tear the hull apart. One of the workers nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Got it, ma'am. We'll make sure it's perfect. Sarah forced a smile, though her mind was elsewhere. The enormity of the task weighed heavily on her. These ships weren't just machines. They were humanity's last line of defense. If they failed, Earth would fall. She shook her head, pushing the thought aside. There was no time for doubt. In orbit above Earth, Michael Brooks sat strapped into the cockpit of an upgraded fighter, running diagnostics on its systems. The *SS Vanguard *, his squadron's flagship, loomed nearby, its sleek design bristling with weapons. Training missions had grown more intense over the past weeks, simulating every possible scenario. Michael knew the Council's forces would be faster, stronger, and more experienced, but he also knew that fear wouldn't help him survive. "Brooks, you're up next," came the voice of his instructor over the comms. Michael took a deep breath and activated the engines. The ship roared to life, vibrating beneath him as he guided it into position. On the simulator screen, enemy drones appeared, their movements quick and unpredictable. He fired a burst of plasma bolts, narrowly missing one before adjusting his aim. Sweat dripped down his face as he pushed the controls to their limits, spinning and dodging through the virtual battlefield. "You're getting better," the instructor said after the exercise ended. "But better isn't good enough. Out there, hesitation means death." Michael clenched his jaw, but didn't respond. He knew the truth in those words. Every mistake in training could cost lives in real combat. As he climbed out of the cockpit, he glanced at the other pilots practicing nearby. Some looked confident, while others seemed terrified. He wondered how many of them would make it through their first mission. Meanwhile, Emily Dawson sat hunched over her desk, surrounded by stacks of research papers and half-empty coffee cups. Her eyes darted between her computer screen and a glowing model of a quantum reactor. The Council's blockade had cut off access to rare materials needed for advanced technology, forcing her to improvise. She tapped her pen against the desk, lost in thought. Could she modify the reactor to create a shield strong enough to withstand Council attacks? It was risky, but humanity couldn't afford to play it safe anymore. Her concentration was broken by a knock at the door. Jacob Carter stepped inside, looking weary but determined. "Emily," he said softly, "we need results. Fast." "I know," she replied, rubbing her temples. "I'm doing everything I can, but this isn't like flipping a switch. It takes time." Jacob sighed, leaning against the wall. "Time is something we don't have. The Council won't wait forever." Emily nodded, guilt gnawing at her. She had caused this mess, and now everyone was counting on her to fix it. She turned back to her work, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Failure wasn't an option, not when so much was at stake. Across the globe, factories churned out weapons and equipment day and night. Civilians volunteered to help, working long hours without complaint. In schools, children learned about rationing and emergency protocols. Posters urging unity and resilience covered walls in cities and towns. Humanity was preparing for war, not just militarily, but as a species. As the days passed, Sarah found herself growing more hopeful. Despite the odds, people refused to give up. They adapted, innovated, and supported one another. Even amid fear and uncertainty, there was a sense of purpose, a shared determination to protect their home. But deep down, Sarah couldn't ignore the lingering question: was it enough? The Council's forces were vast and powerful, and Earth's hastily assembled fleet seemed woefully inadequate in comparison. Still, she reminded herself of Ryan Mitchell's words: Humanity had always risen to meet its challenges, and if hope alone could win wars, then Earth stood a fighting chance. The tension in the control room was thick as Sarah Thompson stared at the monitors displaying Earth's solar system. A blip appeared near Jupiter. A Council patrol ship had entered human territory without warning. Her heart raced as alarms began to sound, red lights flashing across the walls. This was it, the moment everyone had feared. Contact confirmed, a technician announced, his voice trembling. It's one of theirs. They're scanning us. General Ryan Mitchell's face appeared on a screen, his expression grim. Stand your ground, he ordered. Do not fire unless fired upon. Let's see what they want first. Sarah nodded, though fear coiled in her stomach. She relayed the message to the nearby squadron of fighters, including Michael Brooks, who were already scrambling toward the intruder. The *SS Vanguard* led the group, its engines glowing faintly against the blackness of space. Through his cockpit window, Michael could see the alien ship growing larger as they approached, a sleek, angular vessel that looked both beautiful and deadly. "This is Lieutenant Brooks," Michael said into his comms. "We're in position, waiting for orders." Back on Earth, Jacob Carter watched the unfolding situation from Mission Command. His hands were clenched into fists as he listened to the tense exchange between humans and aliens. The Council ship broadcast a single message: withdraw immediately or face consequences. It was cold, mechanical, and left no room for negotiation. "We're not going anywhere," Ryan replied firmly over the open channel. "You're violating our airspace. Leave now, or we'll defend ourselves." For a moment, there was silence. Then the Council ship moved closer, its weapons systems powering up. Panic rippled through the human fleet. Were they really about to engage in combat with beings far more advanced? "Hold steady," Ryan commanded. "Don't give them an excuse to attack." But miscommunication struck. One of the Council drones detached from the main ship and drifted toward the *SS Vanguard*. Believing it to be hostile, Michael fired a warning shot. The drone exploded in a burst of light, and the Council ship retaliated instantly, launching a volley of energy blasts. "All units, engage," Ryan shouted, abandoning diplomacy. Michael's heart pounded as he maneuvered his fighter into battle. The alien ship was fast, but humanity's pilots had trained relentlessly for this exact scenario. Plasma bolts streaked through space as the two sides clashed. Explosions lit up the darkness, debris scattering in all directions. "Stay close to the Vanguard," Michael yelled to his squadron. "If we split up, we're dead." Despite being outnumbered, the humans fought fiercely. Sarah monitored their progress from Earth, her fingers flying over her keyboard to reroute power to damaged ships. "Shields holding at 40%, she reported. "Keep pushing. They're weakening." On board the *SS Vanguard*, Captain Laura Hayes barked orders to her crew. "Target their engines. Disable them before they can call for reinforcements." The battle raged on, each side taking heavy damage. Just when it seemed the Council ship might overwhelm them, Michael spotted an opening. With precision born of desperation, he guided his fighter behind the enemy vessel and unleashed a concentrated barrage of plasma fire. The Council ship shuddered, smoke pouring from its hull. Moments later, it went dark, drifting helplessly in space. Cheers erupted among the human fleet, but the victory felt hollow. The Council would see this skirmish as an act of war. As Michael returned to the safety of the Vanguard, he couldn't shake the weight of what had just happened. Humanity had drawn first blood, and there was no turning back. News of the battle spread quickly across Earth. People gathered in streets and homes, watching live broadcasts of the conflict. Some celebrated the win, while others mourned the inevitable escalation. Emily Dawson sat alone in her lab, staring at the glowing equations on her screen. War had begun, and now everything rested on her shoulders. She whispered to herself, "I hope we're ready." Jacob Carter stared at the flickering hologram of Zorak, leader of the Krill. The alien's reptilian features were sharp and angular, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the makeshift meeting room. Behind him loomed images of starships, fast, sleek vessels that hinted at the Krill's advanced technology. Jacob leaned forward, trying to mask his nervousness. This was humanity's last chance to find allies. "Why should we help you?" Zorak asked bluntly, his voice raspy and cold. "Your kind has done nothing but anger the Council. Associating with you puts us at risk." Jacob took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Because the Council's rule is unjust," he replied. "They've oppressed species like yours for centuries, forcing compliance through fear. If Earth falls, no one will stand against them. But if we work together, we can weaken their grip on the galaxy." Zorak tilted his head, considering the proposal. His forked tongue flicked briefly as he studied Jacob. Finally, he spoke. "Very well. We will provide limited support, shielding technology and intelligence about the Council's fleet movements. But understand this, if things go badly, the Krill will cut ties. You're on your own then." Jacob nodded, relief washing over him. It wasn't a perfect alliance, but it was something. As the transmission ended, he turned to Emily Dawson, who had been listening silently from the corner. "We need to integrate their tech into our ships immediately," he said. "Can you handle it?" Emily hesitated, her mind racing. She hadn't slept properly in days, and the pressure was crushing. But she forced herself to nod. "I'll do it," she said firmly. "But I'll need help." Across the solar system, Sarah Thompson worked tirelessly alongside her team to install the Krill's shielding upgrades onto the *SS Vanguard*. The new systems were unlike anything they'd ever seen. Complex, efficient, and far beyond human engineering. Every bolt and wire had to be precise. Even a small mistake could render the shields useless. "This isn't going to be easy," muttered one of the engineers, wiping grease from his hands. "Their tech doesn't exactly play nice with ours." Sarah clenched her jaw. "Then make it work," she snapped. "We don't have time for excuses." Her harsh tone surprised even herself, but she didn't apologize. There was too much at stake. As the hours dragged on, her team pushed through exhaustion, determined to finish before the next attack came. Meanwhile, Michael Brooks sat in the cockpit of his fighter, staring out at the stars. The skirmish near Jupiter had left him shaken. He replayed the battle in his mind, wondering if he'd made the right call firing on the drone. What if diplomacy could have saved them? Was war truly unavoidable? His thoughts were interrupted by a message from Captain Laura Hayes. "Brooks, report to Briefing Room 5, she ordered. "We've got intel from our new friends." Michael arrived to find Ryan Mitchell pacing in front of a large display showing maps of nearby star systems. "The Krill shared information about Council supply routes," Ryan explained. "If we hit these targets, we can disrupt their logistics and buy ourselves more time." Laura pointed to a cluster of waypoints. "Your squadron will leave the mission, destroy their cargo ships, but avoid civilian casualties. We're not monsters." Michael swallowed hard. Leading an attack on enemy territory felt like stepping into a nightmare, but he didn't argue. Instead, he saluted and headed back to his ship, steeling himself for what lay ahead. As the days passed, humanity prepared for its next move. Factories churned out weapons faster than ever, powered by stolen Council designs provided by the Krill. Pilots trained relentlessly, pushing their limits to prepare for the dangers ahead. Even civilians contributed, donating supplies and volunteering for labor shifts. Emily worked late into the night, adapting the quantum reactor to enhance the Krill's shields. Her hands trembled as she adjusted delicate circuits, knowing any error could doom them all. Yet, despite the strain, she refused to quit. Humanity needed every advantage it could get. One evening, as Sarah walked through the shipyard, she noticed graffiti scrawled on a wall. "For Earth." Someone had painted it in bold letters, surrounded by stars. She smiled faintly, feeling a spark of hope. No matter how dire the situation became, people refused to give up. They'd fought not just for survival, but for a future worth living. In the quiet moments between battles, Michael found himself thinking about home. He wondered if his family would ever forgive him for leaving, or if they'd even survive long enough to see him again. But as he gazed at the distant glow of Earth, he reminded himself why he was fighting. For all its flaws, humanity deserved a place among the stars. And he wouldn't let anyone take that away. The Council's attack on Mars came without warning. One moment, the Red Planet's colonies were bustling with activity. Miners extracting resources, engineers maintaining habitats, families living their lives. And the next, chaos erupted. The sky lit up with streaks of fire as enemy ships descended, their weapons tearing through the thin atmosphere. Alarms blared across the surface, and civilians scrambled for cover. Sarah Thompson stood in the command center of New Olympus, the largest Martian settlement. Her hands gripped the edge of a console as she watched the devastation unfold on multiple screens. Buildings collapsed under relentless bombardment, and plumes of dust obscured entire districts. "We're losing power," someone shouted behind her. "Shields are down to 20%. General Ryan Mitchell's voice crackled over the comms. "Hold your ground. Reinforcements are en route, but you need to buy us time." Sarah clenched her teeth. Time was the one thing they didn't have. The Council's forces were overwhelming, their ships larger and more advanced than anything humanity had faced before. Ground troops deployed from dropships, advancing toward the colony with ruthless efficiency. Sarah knew that if they breached the main hub, it would mean the end for thousands of people. "Divert all remaining power to the eastern sector," she ordered. "We'll make our stand there." Turning to a group of engineers, she added, "I need those shield generators back online. Now." Outside, Michael Brooks led his squadron in desperate sorties against the invaders. His fighter darted between enemy ships, firing plasma bolts with precision. Each hit felt like a small victory, but the odds were stacked against them. For every Council ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "This is insane," yelled one of his wingmen over the comms. "There's too many of them." "Stay focused," Michael replied, dodging a barrage of energy blasts. "If we fall back, they'll overrun the colony." Back inside New Olympus, Sarah worked frantically to repair damaged systems. Explosions rocked the facility, sending debris raining down around her. Her team huddled together, shielding themselves as best they could. One engineer, a young woman named Clara, handed Sarah a wrench. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Help me reroute these circuits," Sarah said, pointing to a sparking panel. "If we can stabilize the shields, we might hold out until reinforcements arrive." Clara nodded and got to work, her fear giving way to determination. Together, they patched wires and adjusted controls, sweat dripping down their faces. The air grew thick with smoke, but neither woman stopped moving. Every second counted. As the battle raged on, Emily Dawson monitored the situation from Earth, her heart pounding. She had contributed to the shield technology being used on Mars, and now she watched helplessly as it struggled under the Council's assault. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, searching for a way to improve the system remotely. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "There has to be something." Then she saw it, a flaw in the shield modulation. A quick adjustment could boost stability, at least temporarily. Without hesitation, she sent the update to Sarah's team. Moments later, the shields flared brighter, holding steady against another wave of attacks. On the front lines, General Mitchell arrived with reinforcements just as the colony's defenses began to crumble. Fresh troops poured into the fray, driving back the Council forces. Michael and his squadron provided air support, targeting enemy positions with renewed vigor. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. By the time the Council retreated, much of New Olympus lay in ruins. Bodies littered the streets, and fires burned unchecked across the landscape. Survivors emerged from bunkers, their faces streaked with ash and tears. Sarah walked among them, her legs unsteady, but her resolve unshaken. They had held the line, but at a terrible cost. Later, As Michael stared at the wreckage from his cockpit, he felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. Humanity had survived another day, but the scars ran deep. He thought about Sarah, Emily, and everyone else who had fought so hard to protect their home. War wasn't just about winning battles. It was about enduring the losses that came with them. And somewhere in the distance, the council regrouped, planning their next move. Emily Dawson sat alone in her lab, surrounded by glowing screens and scattered notes. Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but she couldn't stop now. The war had reached a breaking point, and humanity needed something, anything, that could tip the scales. She stared at the equations on her monitor, her mind racing. What if the quantum technology she had created wasn't just a problem? What if it could be the solution? She grabbed a marker and began sketching on the whiteboard, her movements frantic. The idea was risky, a weapon based on collapsing miniature black holes to destabilize enemy fleets. But it might work. If she could harness the immense energy generated by the collapse, she could create a chain reaction capable of disabling council ships. She called it Project Nova. Jacob Carter entered the lab quietly, watching as Emily scribbled furiously. "What are you working on?" he asked, his voice soft. Emily turned to him, her face pale but determined. "A last resort," she said. "If we can build this, it might give us a fighting chance. But it's dangerous. If something goes wrong, it could destroy us along with them." Jacob nodded slowly. "We don't have many options left. I'll take this to President Bennett." Within hours, Project Nova was approved. The military diverted all available resources to the effort, and Sarah Thompson was assigned to oversee its construction. The weapon would require rare materials, some of which could only be found in deep space. Michael Brooks and his squadron were tasked with retrieving these components, no matter the cost. "This mission is critical," Ryan Mitchell told Michael during the briefing. "Without these materials, Project Nova won't happen. You're authorized to use any means necessary." Michael swallowed hard. He knew what that meant. The Council wouldn't hesitate to attack anyone venturing into their territory. Still, he saluted and prepared for the mission, knowing failure wasn't an option. The first target was an asteroid field rich in neutronium, guarded by Council patrols. As Michael led his squadron through the dense rocks, tension filled the air. Enemy ships appeared suddenly, firing on them without warning. Plasma bolts streaked through the void as Michael maneuvered his fighter with precision, dodging attacks while returning fire. "Stay close to the cargo hauler," he shouted over the comms. A transport ship followed behind them, collecting samples of the precious material. If they lost it, the mission would fail. One of his wingmen, a young pilot named Alex, took a direct hit. His ship spiraled out of control, disappearing into the asteroid field. "Fox 3 down," someone yelled. "We can't stop," Michael replied, his voice tight with emotion. "Keep moving." They fought their way through the ambush, losing 2 more ships before reaching safety. When they returned to Earth, the cargo hold was filled with neutronium. It wasn't enough to complete Project Nova, but it was a start. Back at the lab, Emily worked tirelessly to integrate the materials into the weapon's design. Each day brought new challenges, but she refused to give up. Sarah stayed by her side, helping coordinate efforts between engineers and scientists. Together, they pushed forward, driven by desperation. Meanwhile, the Council launched another assault, this time targeting Earth's moon base, where Project Nova was being assembled. Explosions rocked the surface as enemy forces closed in. Sarah rushed to protect the unfinished weapon, risking her life to repair damaged systems under heavy fire. Her hands moved quickly, reconnecting wires and stabilizing the core. "We're not done yet," she shouted to her team. "Hold the line." As the battle raged, Michael volunteered for a suicide mission to distract the Council fleet. He led a small group of fighters in a daring charge, drawing enemy ships away from the base. His actions gave Sarah and her team the time they needed to finish repairs. When the dust settled, the moon base still stood, though barely intact. Michael's squadron suffered heavy losses, but their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Project Nova was nearly ready. In the quiet moments after the attack, Emily looked at the weapon they had built. It was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. A desperate gamble born of necessity. She whispered softly, "Let's hope this works." The Council's final assault on Earth began with a deafening roar. Orbital bombardments rained down from the sky, turning cities into fiery wastelands. The ground shook violently as plasma beams tore through buildings, leaving behind craters and smoke. Civilians fled in terror, seeking refuge in underground bunkers while soldiers fought desperately to hold the line. Humanity's last stand was here, on their home planet, and everyone knew what was at stake. Sarah Thompson stood inside the moonbase control room, her face streaked with sweat and grime. The *SS Vanguard * hovered nearby, its hull battered but still operational. On the monitors, she watched Earth burn, entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, rivers of fire snaking through once thriving cities. Her heart ached, but she forced herself to focus. Project Nova was nearly ready, but they needed more time. "Enemy ships are entering lunar orbit," an officer announced, his voice trembling. "They're heading straight for us." Sarah clenched her fists. "Activate the base shields and prepare the weapon," she ordered. "We can't let them destroy this place." Outside, Michael Brooks led his squadron in a desperate attempt to delay the Council fleet. His fighter darted between enemy ships, firing bursts of plasma, while dodging retaliatory strikes. Every maneuver felt like a gamble, every second borrowed time. He glanced at his fuel gauge. It was running dangerously low. "This is Brooks," he said over the comms. "I'm going in. Cover me." Before anyone could respond, he broke formation and charged toward the Council's flagship. It was a suicide run, and he knew it. But if he could buy even a few minutes for Sarah and the team on the moonbase, it would be worth it. "Michael, no," Jacob Carter shouted from Mission Command, watching the live feed in horror, but there was nothing he could do to stop him. Michael fired everything he had, targeting the flagship's engines. Explosions erupted across its surface, but the massive ship barely flinched. Then, a blast from one of its cannons struck his fighter, sending it spinning out of control. As his cockpit filled with smoke, Michael whispered a single word: "Earth." Back at the moonbase, Sarah heard the news and froze. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. There was no time to grieve. Taking a deep breath, she turned to Emily Dawson, who was frantically working on the final adjustments to Project Nova. "How much longer?" Sarah demanded. 2 minutes, Emily replied, her hands shaking as she typed commands into the console. Just 2 more minutes. The Council forces closed in, their ships launching waves of missiles at the moonbase. The shields flickered under the barrage, threatening to collapse. Sarah grabbed a toolkit and ran to reinforce the shield generator herself, climbing over debris and dodging falling rubble. She worked quickly, rerouting power and stabilizing the system just as another explosion rocked the facility. "We're losing structural integrity," someone yelled. "If the core goes, we're done." Sarah ignored the warning, focusing on keeping the shields alive. Around her, engineers scrambled to patch breaches and prevent total failure. The air grew thick with smoke, and the heat was unbearable, but no one stopped moving. Finally, Emily's voice cut through the chaos. "It's ready," she cried. "Project Nova is online." Sarah sprinted back to the control room, her legs burning with exhaustion. "Fire it now," she commanded. With trembling hands, Emily activated the weapon. A blinding light erupted from the moonbase, spreading outward in a shockwave that engulfed the Council fleet. Ships were torn apart as miniature black holes formed, destabilizing their systems and pulling them into oblivion. The flagship, caught in the chain reaction, began to break apart, its crew powerless to escape. On Earth, people watched the skies as the Council's bombardment ceased. For a moment, there was silence, a collective holding of breath, as humanity waited to see if the weapon had worked. Then, slowly, the remaining council ships began to retreat. Their formations scattered, fleeing the destruction caused by Project Nova. Cheers erupted across the globe, though they were tinged with sorrow. Victory had come at a terrible cost. In the aftermath, Sarah collapsed onto the floor of the control room, tears streaming down her face. They had won, but nothing would ever feel the same again. The silence that followed the council's retreat was heavy and surreal. Earth's skies, once filled with fire and destruction, now seemed eerily calm. Smoke still rose from the ruins of cities, and the scars of war were everywhere. But for the first time in months, there was hope. The council had been pushed back, their forces shattered by Project Nova. It wasn't a complete victory, far from it, but it was enough to make them reconsider their stance. Jacob Carter stood in the wreckage of the moonbase, his uniform covered in dust. He stared at the glowing remnants of Project Nova, its energy slowly dissipating into space. The weapon had saved humanity, but at what cost? Michael Brooks was gone, along with countless others who had given their lives in the fight. Jacob felt the weight of their sacrifice pressing down on him, a reminder of how fragile peace truly was. Back on Earth, President Laura Bennett addressed the world from a makeshift broadcast studio. Her face was tired but resolute as she spoke to billions of people. "Today, we have proven that humanity cannot be broken," she said, her voice steady. "We faced an enemy far stronger than us, and we stood our ground. But this is not the end. We must now work to rebuild, not just our planet, but our relationships with the galaxy." Her words resonated deeply with Emily Dawson, who sat alone in her lab, staring at the empty screens where equations and data had once flickered. She had created the technology that started the war, and now she had helped build the weapon that ended it. Yet she couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at her. Was it worth it? The lives lost, the cities destroyed, all because of something she had built. Sarah Thompson wandered through the ruins of the moonbase, her steps slow and uncertain. She stopped near the spot where Michael's fighter had disappeared, her throat tightening. He had sacrificed himself to protect the weapon, to give humanity a fighting chance. She whispered his name softly, vowing never to forget his bravery. In the days that followed, negotiations began between Earth and the surviving members of the Galactic Council. Councillor Valen, his usual arrogance replaced by cautious respect, agreed to meet with Jacob and other human representatives. "You have shown us that you are capable of both destruction and determination," he said during one tense session. "Perhaps coexistence is possible after all." But trust didn't come easily. Many species within the council viewed humanity with suspicion, fearing another reckless act could destabilize the galaxy. Jacob worked tirelessly to reassure them, emphasizing Earth's willingness to learn and grow. "We don't want to conquer or dominate," he told them. "We want to belong, to contribute, to share, and to build a better future for everyone." Meanwhile, Emily threw herself into research, determined to find ways to use quantum technology for good. She collaborated with scientists from across the globe, sharing knowledge and ideas. Slowly, humanity began to repair not just its cities but also its spirit. As Sarah looked out at the stars from the battered moonbase, she felt a mix of emotions. Hope, sorrow, determination. They all swirled together, forming a resolve she hadn't felt before. Humanity had faced extinction and survived. Now came the hard part, learning to live alongside others without repeating the mistakes of the past. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but Sarah believed they could walk it, if they chose to do so together. Somewhere among the stars, new challenges awaited. But for now, humanity had earned a moment of peace, and perhaps, just perhaps, a chance to prove they deserved a place among the galaxy's greatest civilizations.